The night my life ended, the television was congratulating everyone except me. Smiling anchor stood in front of a glowing market chart and called it the greatest 15-year bull market in modern history. Stocks had climbed, real estate had exploded, unknown startups had become household names. Ordinary people, she said, had changed their lives by entering early and staying patient. I was sitting on the floor of my parents' small apartment with instant noodles gone soft beside me. 3 empty beer cans leaned against my desk. My monitor still showed the victory screen of a game I had been grinding all night. In that game I had resources, I had timing, I had a plan. In real life I had nothing. My name was Haruto Sato. I was 35 years old, unemployed, single, and still living in the room I had promised to leave before I turned 20. The anchor said people who entered early are now calling this the easiest wealth cycle of their lives. The easiest wealth cycle. That sentence hit harder than any insult, because I remembered the signs. Not as useful knowledge, not then. Back then, every warning and opportunity had looked like background noise. Warehouse district people mocked because the trains were bad later, became a luxury zone. Small payment company everyone called overvalued, became part of daily life. Remote work tool people laughed at became necessary. Crash scared everyone into selling, right before the next climb began. I had watched all of it happen from this room. The world had been handing out signals for 15 years, and I had been chasing fake levels on fake characters, because real life already felt too late. Behind my door, my mother coughed in the kitchen. My father lowered the living room television, probably because he thought the sound would bother me. That hurt more than shouting. They did not shout anymore. They had passed shouting years ago. Disappointment becomes quieter when people run out of hope. I looked at my reflection in the dark window. Pale face, tired eyes, bad posture. A man who had become exactly what he hated seeing. If I had known, I whispered, just once, if I had known early enough. That was when the room changed. The game screen flickered. The television sound dropped into a low hum. Blue-white panel opened in front of my face, sharp enough to make me kick over 2 cans as I stumbled back. It did not look like a website. It did not look like a game menu. It hovered in the air, silent and clean, as if reality had finally loaded an option screen. System message. Do you wish to be reborn? Yes or no? For a long moment, I did not move. My first thought was that I had finally broken something in my head. My second thought was worse. What if I had not? Panel waited above the noodles, beer cans, and market chart that had just judged my entire life. No angel explained it, no warning appeared, no promise came with it. Just one question, yes or no. And for the first time in years, tomorrow was not asking me to endure it. Yesterday was asking if I wanted to steal it back. Before I answered the panel, I understood exactly why it had appeared in that room. My life had become a routine, built around avoidance. I knew the sounds of my parents' apartment better than I knew any workplace. My mother's slippers in the hallway. My father's keys near the door. The short pause before one of them almost knocked, and the longer pause after they decided not to. They were not cruel people, that made it harder. Cruel parents would have given me an enemy. Mine gave me meals, quiet concern, and the kind of patience that made failure feel heavier every year. I had not always been hopeless, I had been average. Average grades, average dreams. Average belief that life would eventually begin because adults always talked as if it did. Then one exam went badly, one part-time job ended badly. One interview became 3, then 10, then none. The world did not collapse, it simply stopped inviting me forward. Games were easier. Games told you the rules before they punished you. Games gave experience for grinding. Games let you fail, restart, farm resources, learn patterns, and wait for the right opening. Real life only sent bills. So I became good at things no one respected. I could watch a game economy for 12 hours and know when a rare item would spike. I could save weak resources until other players panicked and sold theirs. I could study a boss pattern until an impossible fight became routine. I knew how to wait. I knew how to read systems. I knew how to move when other people became emotional. But I used all of that in worlds that vanished when the server shut down. In the real world, I avoided bank apps, relatives, classmates, and mirrors. I told myself I was tired. Then I told myself I was unlucky. Then I stopped explaining it all. Still, regret has a memory of its own. I did not know exact stock prices. I did not know secret formulas. I had never been a professional investor. But I remembered broad shapes because each one had stabbed me later. The cheap district that became expensive. The mocked platform that became obvious. The panic that became a buying opportunity. The phrase that always came after the news articles. Anyone who entered early would have won. That was the part I could not forgive. I had been alive. I had been awake enough to notice. I had simply been too ashamed, too scared, and too used to losing to move. My father once told me that talent without movement turns rot. I hated him for saying it. Then I proved him right. So when the blue-white panel asked if I wanted to be reborn, the answer was not born in that second. It had been forming for 15 years. Maybe the panel was a hallucination. Maybe it was a trap. Maybe I was only a failed man reaching for another escape. But a life like mine does not end in one dramatic moment. It ends in thousands of mornings where you promise to change and do not. I looked toward the door where my parents slept on the other side of my shame. Then I looked back at the panel. The cursor hovered over no. My hand moved to yes. I expected thunder, pain, a flash bright enough to make the choice feel grand. Nothing happened. The panel disappeared. The television volume returned. My room stayed my room, and I was still Haruto Sato, 35 years old, surrounded by cold noodles and empty cans. For 1 second, shame burned hotter than hope. Of course, even a miracle had looked at me and changed its mind. I crawled onto the futon without cleaning anything. The last thing I saw before sleep took me was the market chart on television, still climbing like it had somewhere better to be. The first rebirth felt exactly like failure. I woke because sunlight hit my face. Not the weak gray light that squeezed through my old curtains. This was clean morning light, bright enough to hurt. The room smelled different too. Less stale. Less like dust, beer, and a door that had not been opened properly in years. My first thought was that my mother had cleaned while I slept. My second thought was that my body was wrong. The futon was too low beneath me. My hands were too smooth. My breathing was too light. When I sat up, my back did not ache, my stomach did not fold, and my knees did not complain. I moved like someone had removed invisible weights from my bones. I stumbled to the mirror on the closet door. A 19-year-old stared back. Lean body, clear skin, sharp eyes. The kind of face I would have hated in my first life, because it looked like the world opened doors before it even knocked. I touched my cheek. The boy in the mirror touched his. And the memories hit me in broken pieces. Ren Takahashi, 19 years old. University student. Part-time convenience store worker. Lives with his mother and younger sister. My knees almost gave out. I was not Haruto Sato anymore. At least not outside my own head. Phone buzzed on the desk. I grabbed it so fast I almost dropped it. The date on the screen made the room tilt. 16 years earlier. Not a similar world, not a fantasy kingdom, not a dungeon. The same country, the same economy. The same market cycle before it became history. The impossible panel had not sent me to heaven. It had sent me to the beginning of the chart. Then the door slid open. A girl in a school uniform stood there holding a towel. Her eyes were narrow, sharp, and already suspicious. "Ren," she said, "why are you staring at yourself like that?" My throat closed. Yui Takahashi, Ren's younger sister. The name arrived with the same strange certainty as the others, but it did not bring comfort. It brought pressure. She was real. She expected a brother. And that brother had apparently been standing frozen in front of a mirror like a stranger. I forced a smile that felt borrowed. I told her I had slept badly. Yui did not argue. She tossed the towel at me and said breakfast was almost ready. That was my first lesson in the second life. A miracle does not give you time to be amazed. It gives you a role and punishes you if you cannot play it. At the kitchen table, Ren's mother apologized for the thin breakfast before anyone complained. She smiled too quickly, the way people smile when they are trying to hide numbers in their head. Then I saw the envelopes near the rice cooker. Rent notices, late fees, a final warning folded under a chipped magnet. My new family was close to losing the apartment. The fantasy of youth and beauty lasted less than 1 hour. By the time Yui left for school, I had confirmed 3 things. The year was real. The market had not exploded yet. And if I did nothing quickly, the first people I failed in this timeline would be the ones already calling me family. I stood in the hallway with the rent notice in my hand, and my new name printed on the paper. Ren Takahashi. A second life. A new face. No money. And 16 years of broken future memories, pressing against my skull like a map drawn in smoke. The first thing I did was not buy anything. That would have been stupid. Younger man with a handsome face might have believed destiny owed him success. Haruto Sato knew better. The world loves humiliating people who move before they understand the rules. So I checked. I spent the morning on Ren's old laptop, comparing my memories with the present. Headlines, forum posts, district prizes, company names, public mood, tech chatter, search results that looked meaningless to everyone else but made my hands go cold. I did not look for exact numbers. I did not have those. My memory was not a sacred prophecy. It was a pile of old regrets. A warehouse district people still called dead. Payment company whose early users sounded like cult members. Founder mocked for an idea that would later become normal. Small panic that would frighten retail traders for 3 days. Forgotten online trading event old investors would later laugh about missing. Piece by piece, the smoke map began to match the world in front of me. Not perfectly. Enough. That was more frightening than if none of it matched. Because if the future was close to the one I remembered, then I had power. Not a sword, not magic, not a level-up screen. Something cleaner and more dangerous. Timing. The problem was seed money. Ren had almost nothing. A few coins in a drawer. A half-empty transit card. Part-time convenience store shift that paid just enough to insult the person receiving it. The apartment needed money soon, not after some glorious rise. So I worked. I bowed to customers. Stocked drinks. Cleaned spills. Smiled at drunk office workers who called me pretty boy and told me to enjoy youth while it lasted. Every coin went into a small account. My manager laughed when I refused to buy a snack after a long shift. A coworker asked if I was saving for a date. I said I was saving for an opening. He laughed harder. At night, Yui found me at the kitchen table with receipts, printouts, and 3 browser tabs open to a tiny social trading platform no serious investor respected. She asked when I had started caring about money. I answered too quickly. I said people should care before money becomes an emergency. Her face changed by one careful degree. Ren Takahashi should have complained, joked, or waved her away. Instead, I had spoken like a man who had already lived through the consequences. Yui did not press. That was worse. Sharp people save questions until answers cannot escape. The event I remembered was small. Short-lived trading competition tied to a platform partnership. Most people treated it like a gimmick. But a pricing error, a user surge, and one acquisition rumor had once turned tiny positions into enough money to matter. In my first life, I had scrolled past a forum post about it while eating noodles. Someone had written, even a convenience store paycheck could have saved you if you were early. This time, I was the convenience store paycheck. The night before the event opened, I stared at the deposit screen until my eyes burned. It was not much money. In my first life, I had wasted more on games in a month. Here it was everything. Blue flicker appeared at the edge of my vision. System message. Timeline deviation rate. 0.1%. Then it vanished. The panel was not gone. It was watching. I should have stopped. I should have asked what the number meant. The rent notice was on the table, and Ren's mother had started skipping dinner while pretending she was not hungry. So I confirmed the transaction. Everyone else saw a poor 19-year-old gambling with pocket money. I saw the first crack in history. For 2 days nothing happened. That was the worst part. Games, waiting feels strategic because the screen keeps showing you numbers. In real life, waiting feels like being stupid in slow motion. The platform moved a little, then stopped. Forum mocked the event. One user wrote that only idiots and students were touching it. Another joked that a pretty boy with lunch money was about to learn what real investors already knew. I did not respond. Responding was for people who needed witnesses before results. But inside, I was not calm. My memory had never been tested like this. I remembered the event as a punchline from years later, not as a clean chart. What if the rumor started on a different day? What if the platform changed rules? What if my tiny move had already nudged the future? On the 3rd morning, the first alert came. User volume spiked. Then a partnership rumor hit. Then a larger payment company confirmed a technical integration that the forum had dismissed as impossible. The number in my account moved. Not like a miracle, like a door unlocking. By afternoon, my tiny paycheck had become enough to cover the overdue rent, the late fees, and 2 months of breathing room. I sat in the convenience store stockroom, staring at the balance, while the fluorescent lights hummed above me. I had been right. For the first time in either life, being right changed something real. At evening, I placed the transfer confirmation in front of Ren's mother before she could apologize for dinner again. She stared at the page, then at me, then back at the page. She asked where it came from. I gave her the simplest safe answer, a lucky online trade, a small event. I had been careful. It was not entirely a lie. Ren's mother cried quietly. Not dramatic tears, the exhausted kind that arrive when someone has been holding a room together with both hands and one burden finally leaves. That should have been enough for me. It was enough for her. It was enough to keep the apartment. But shame is gritty. After years of feeling worthless, one victory did not make me humble. It made me hungry. The forum changed the next morning. The same people who had laughed now filled the thread with excuses. Some said it was luck. Some claimed they had seen it coming too. One user posted a screenshot of my old comment, the one where I had said the event was mispriced. The reply shifted, not respect yet, suspicion. Who is this guy? How did he know? Pretty boy got lucky. Still, the laughter was different. It had an edge now. Yui cornered me near the balcony that night. She did not ask about the money first. She asked why I had used the phrase, people panic the same way in every cycle. I had not even noticed saying it. A 19-year-old brother should not have sounded like someone who had watched decades of fear repeat itself. I told her I had read too many finance blogs. She did not believe me. Instead, she said, you saved us, so I'm thankful, but you looked happy before Mom did. That sentence stayed with me because she was right. I had been relieved the apartment was safe, but before kindness, before gratitude, before family, I had felt the rush of winning. Later, when the apartment was quiet, the blue-white shimmer returned near my hand. System message, timeline deviation rate increased, 1.3%. Memory reliability may fluctuate. The words vanished before I could touch them. Fear rose in my stomach. Then I looked at the rent receipt on the table. Paid. For a man who had wasted one life watching other people move early, fear felt smaller than proof. I had saved a home, and the world had laughed a little less. After the apartment, I told myself I would move carefully. I lasted 9 days. Problem with having a map of the future is that every street starts looking like a test of your courage. A district nobody respects yet. Founder begging for early users. Fashionable stock I remembered only as a future scandal. Small panic that would scare retail investors into selling right before the rebound. I did not know everything, but I knew enough to see waves forming before other people gave them names. So I moved in small pieces. I sold before a panic and bought after fear peaked. I visited the ugly warehouse district before the first redevelopment rumor. I backed a tiny software company after reading a founder interview everyone called delusional. I avoided a popular stock because my memory of it was not a number, but a headline and a sinking feeling. Each move was different, that mattered. If I repeated one trick, people could call it luck. When I moved across markets, districts, rumors, and timing, luck started looking nervous. The forums noticed first. They called me student money, then pretty boy gambler, then lucky brat. And one user made a list, 5 strange moves, 5 early entries, 4 clean exits, 1 avoided disaster. The thread title was a joke. The calendar prince arrives before the boom. The name spread faster than the facts. First I hated it, then I checked the thread again and again. Calendar Prince, a ridiculous name, a public name. Name that did not belong to Haruto Sato, the man no one waited for. It belonged to Ren Takahashi, the handsome nobody who arrived too early and left too cleanly. Recognition is dangerous when you have starved on invisibility. It tastes like justice even when it is only attention. Soon the reaction moved offline. Real estate agent called after I walked through a half-empty district and asked if I represented a buyer. Founder messaged me and asked if I would look at his pitch. Local trader offered dinner if I shared my calendar. 2 scammers tried to sell me insider access to information I already knew better than they did. Then came the copycats. Young investors began following my public moves without understanding my reasons. Some bought too late, some sold too early. Some treated my silence as a signal, and my mistakes as conspiracy. That was the first time my influence felt heavy, not enough to stop me, enough to make Yui notice. She found district maps in my room, and asked why real estate agents were calling the house. I told her I was building options. She said I sounded like a middle-aged man, pretending not to be lonely. That hit too close. I snapped that money had saved the apartment. Yui did not flinch. She said money had saved the apartment, but it had not explained why her brother smiled whenever strangers were afraid of being late. I wanted to deny it. Instead, I remembered the noodles, the beer cans, and the market chart that had climbed without me. I did like being early. I liked watching people chase after a door I had already passed through. Far from my room, another list was being made. I did not know that yet. Inside Moro Capital, an analyst flagged my public movements as statistically abnormal. Not illegal, not large enough to threaten markets, but too consistent across unrelated sectors. Too early, too klein. The report moved upward. The time I bought my first small stake in the warehouse district, everyone still called dead. Director Yumi Kuroda had already read my name. She circled one phrase in the report, Calendar Prince, and she placed a silver coin beside the paper and smiled like someone had found a rare asset before the market knew it existed. Yumi Kuroda did not approach me like an enemy. That made her more dangerous. She appeared after one of my meetings with a nervous founder whose idea sounded stupid unless you knew what office work would become 10 years later. A black car stopped near the curb. A woman in a pale coat looked out from the back seat. She knew my name before I gave it. Not Ren Takahashi, student investor, Calendar Prince. Her voice made the nickname sound less like an internet joke and more like a file label. Director Yumi Kuroda of Moro Capital was polished in the way expensive knives are polished. Calm, useful, designed to cut without looking emotional about it. Silver coin rolled across her fingers while she spoke. She said Moro admired unusual timing. She said young talent needed protection. She said public attention attracted thieves, regulators, predators, and fools. Moro could offer structure, access, legitimacy, and doors that would never open for a boy with no elite family and no official history. Everything she offered was something Haruto Sato had wanted. A room where important people listened. A system that called me valuable before I had to beg. A chance to stop being treated like a mistake. And Kuroda said the phrase that turned the air cold. History belongs to the first buyer. I looked at the coin. One side was blank, the other had a thin engraved line, like a timeline split by a blade. Kuroda watched my eyes and smiled. She did not ask how I knew what I knew. She asked whether I understood the cost of arriving early. That was the test. Most people would have heard a metaphor. I heard ownership. She offered me 3 opportunities during that conversation. One was real, one was already dead, one would become legendary but not for years. She wanted to see which future made me flinch. I gave her nothing obvious. Hiding knowledge from Kuroda was not like hiding from forum users. She did not need proof. She only needed enough impossible edges to justify control. At night, the blue-white panel returned over the dark window. System message, timeline deviation rate, 7.8%. Observed returner activity detected, returner. The word sank deeper than any market loss. I was not the only one. Second message flickered, timeline market synchronization unstable. And the letters blurred. For one breath, I smelled warm beer and old noodles, as if my first room had opened inside Ren's body. When the vision cleared, one memory was missing, a company name. I knew it mattered, I knew it became huge, but every time I reached for it, the name dissolved. That was when I understood. The panel had not been mercy. It had been access, and access had rules. Yui found me staring at my reflection again. This time I did not look young to myself. I looked like a man wearing a face he had not earned. She asked what Moro wanted. I told her they wanted to invest. Yui said people like that do not invest in boys, they invest in control. I should have been annoyed. Instead, I was relieved. Someone in this timeline could see the shape of a trap without needing the system to label it. The next morning, Kuroda sent a package. Inside was another silver coin. No note, she did not need one. Moro Capital did not want to stop the Calendar Prince. They wanted to buy him before history realized what he was worth. The first memory that betrayed me was one I trusted too much. It involved a mid-sized logistics company tied to the warehouse district I had been watching. My first life, that company had been a joke for years. Then a redevelopment chain and a delivery tech partnership sent it upwards so fast that old forum users talked about it like a legend. I remembered the broad order clearly. The district rose, the company rose, early investors won. This was supposed to be safe, not exact, not guaranteed, but safe enough. I warned a small circle not to panic when the first dip came. I put my own money in. I left a few public hints visible, because the Calendar Prince rumor had already become impossible to erase. Part of me knew that was reckless. Another part enjoyed it. When people waited for my move, I felt like the market finally had to look at me. Then the future changed. The partnership announcement came early, but from the wrong company. A regulatory complaint hit from nowhere. Then a moral-linked fund took a position that twisted the price movement into something I had never seen. The dip did not rebound, it widened. People who followed me too late started losing money. Not faceless rich traders, students, part-time workers, young office employees who had treated my posts like a shortcut to the life I was trying to build. One of them sent a message before deleting his account. He said he had used rent money because Calendar Prince was never wrong. I read that line until my eyes stopped focusing. The room felt smaller than my old one. I had not told him to do it. That was the defense my mind reached for first. And Yui's voice cut through it before she even entered. You're going to say they chose for themselves. She stood in my doorway with her arms folded, not angry in the loud way. Worse, angry in the disappointed way I recognized from my first life. I told her the market had deviated. I told her Moro had interfered. I told her the pattern should have held. She listened. Then she said, you keep saying pattern when you mean people. That silenced me, because she was not arguing about finance. She was arguing about how I had started seeing the world. In my head, the logistics company had been a node. The district had been a future luxury zone. The panic had been a mechanic. The people following me had been noise around the signal. But the rent money was real. The fear was real. The deleted account was real. And Yui was looking at me like she was trying to find her brother behind my eyes. The system appeared without warning. System message, timeline deviation rate, 22.4%. Memory reliability degraded. Several memories struck at once, then collapsed. Company logo became a blank square. One district name became 3 possible districts. A crash I thought I remembered split into different months. My advantage was not gone. That was almost worse. It had become uncertain. Kuroda called that evening. She did not sound pleased. She sounded prepared. She said public volatility was dangerous for young independent actors. Moro had compliance teams, analysts, reputation managers, and enough capital to absorb mistakes. I did not have to carry the burden alone. The offer was control dressed as rescue. For 1 weak second, I wanted it. I wanted someone else to take the blame, someone else to read the numbers, someone else to make the future stable again. Then Yui turned to leave. I asked if she hated me. She paused in the hall and said she did not know who she was looking at anymore. That hurt more than the failed trade. By morning, the forums turned on me. Some defended me, some mocked me. Some said Calendar Prince had finally been exposed. Others said I had manipulated everyone from the start. My public name, the name I had secretly loved, became a weapon. For the first time since rebirth, I understood that being seen was not the same as being known. I had wanted the world to recognize my value. Instead, I had taught it to gamble on my shadow. I did not answer Kuroda for 3 days. That was not strength, it was survival. Every instinct from my first life told me to hide, close the laptop, avoid the forums. Let the storm pass, pretend the people I hurt were numbers moving on someone else's screen. But this time, hiding had a witness. Yui still made breakfast. She still went to school. She still answered Ren's mother when their mother asked if something was wrong. She stopped asking me questions. For Yui, silence was not peace, it was a locked door. So I changed the only thing I still controlled, my method. The future could no longer be a script. It had to become a compass, a direction, not an answer. I rebuilt my process from the ground up. Every memory needed present confirmation. Every trade needed a reason that worked even if my old timeline was gone. Every public move needed a damage limit for people foolish enough to follow me. That last rule hurt because it forced me to admit they existed, not as noise, as responsibility. Yui did not forgive me when I explained. She asked what I would do for the people already hurt. I wanted to say I could not save everyone. The words tasted like Moro. So I started smaller. Under the Calendar Prince name, I published a warning instead of a prediction. I told followers not to use rent, debt, or family money. I closed positions publicly when I could. I helped organize information for people trapped in the logistics panic, not as a genius oracle, but as someone who had made the risk worse by becoming a symbol. Some called it cowardice, some called it too late. They were not completely wrong, but a few listened. That was the first repair, small, incomplete, real. Yui's first contribution came without announcement. She dropped a local newspaper clipping on my desk. It was about complaints near the warehouse district, tenant groups, delivery workers, small shops being pressured before redevelopment was even official. I had been watching land value. Yui had been watching people. The clue changed everything. The district was not rising naturally. Someone was forcing distress early, collecting property through shell buyers, then using panic to reshape the timing. Moro or someone using Moro's style. Once I looked through Yui's angle, other pieces aligned. The failed logistics memory had not simply drifted, it had been bent. Moro was not only predicting crashes, it was helping create them, then buying the fear first. That was when my original parents returned to the center of my life. Not physically, they did not know me. In this timeline, Haruto Sato was younger, still somewhere else, still on the path to becoming the man I had been. My parents were alive, working, worrying, unaware that a stranger named Ren Takahashi had searched their names at 3 in the morning with shaking hands. Moro's next pressure wave would hit small households hardest, people like them, people with savings too thin to survive engineered panic. I could not walk into their home and say I was their son from a ruined future. So I protected them in the only way I could, quietly. I sent opportunity through a local program, adjusted a public warning where they would see it, helped stabilize a community fund connected to their neighborhood without letting my name touch theirs. It was not dramatic, it did not feel like winning, it felt like love without credit. By the end of the week, Yui stood beside my desk for the first time since the failure. She pointed at 3 linked companies and said if Moro was creating panic, then the real target was not one district. It was a crash, a controlled one. Market break large enough for them to buy distressed assets, silence rivals, and prove that history belonged to whoever moved first. I looked at Kuroda's silver coin on my desk. For the first time, I did not feel tempted by it. I felt late. And this time, being late was not an option. Kuroda met me on the top floor of a building that did not appear on Moro's public website. That was how powerful people like to hide, not in darkness, in places so expensive no one thought to question them. City spread beneath the glass, districts I remembered as cheap, towers I remembered rising years later, streets filled with people who had no idea that a group of investors upstairs was preparing to turn their fear into inventory. Hirota placed the silver coin on the table between us. She told me I had done well for someone untrained. That was the first insult. Then she told me I had reached the natural limit of independent talent. That was the offer. Oro had identified the same instability I had. They called it a market, but not the kind that traded stocks. It traded advantage, regret, and second chances. Returners like me were not miracles. We were instruments that revealed which changes produced profitable deviations. Some burned out, some lost their memories completely. Some were bought early and lived comfortably. Hirota said comfortably like it was mercy. Then she showed me the crash plan. Not directly, people like her never handed over guilt in a folder. She showed me enough. Shell companies, pressure points, false rumors, liquidity traps, distressed neighborhoods, public narratives ready to launch. Oro would create fear, then rescue the market it had wounded. Politicians would call it stability. Media would call it a correction. Ordinary people would call it the month they lost everything. And she wanted me inside. She said my memory was failing because I was fighting the structure alone. Moro could stabilize access, feed me cleaner signals, protect Yui and Ren's mother. Then she added that they could protect the original parents I had been hiding in public records. My blood went cold. She knew, not everything, enough. The old Haruto inside me almost reached for the offer. Wealth, status, safety, recognition, a seat at the table before anyone could laugh at me again. Everything I had wanted in that dark room. Then my phone buzzed, one message from Yui. Not advice, not a plan, just a sentence. People are not outcomes. I stared at those words until the city below stopped looking like a chart. Hirota saw my hesitation and smiled. She thought she understood it. She thought I was calculating price. I was remembering a rent receipt, a deleted message from a follower. My mother's cough behind a closed door in the first life. My original parents alive and unaware. Yui looking at me like saving the apartment might have cost her brother. System appeared across the glass. System message. Timeline deviation rate, 46%. Memory reliability critical. Warning. High impact intervention may erase predictive continuity. There it was, the bill. If I moved against Moro at the scale required, the future I remembered would break beyond repair. The map that made me special would burn. Hirota rolled the coin toward me. She said history rewarded first buyers, not sentimental ones. I picked up the coin. For 1 second she looked satisfied. Then I set it on its edge and flicked it back across the table. I told her she was wrong. History did not belong to the first buyer. It belonged to everyone forced to live inside the purchase. The move began before I left the room. Yui had already sent tenant data to journalists who cared more about patterns than headlines. The founder I had backed in my early rise used his platform to expose suspicious transaction clusters. Followers I had warned after the logistics failure became witnesses instead of copycats. Some still hated me, but they hated being used more. I released my own records, not everything, enough. Enough to show Mara-linked funds moving before rumors they should not have known. Enough to show shell buyers pressuring districts before public redevelopment. Enough to make regulators, rivals, and ordinary investors look in the same direction at the same time. Maro adapted quickly, of course it did. False statements hit the forums within minutes. My accounts were flagged. Friendly contacts vanished. Rumor spread that Calendar Prince had manipulated the entire market and was blaming institutions to escape consequences. For a moment it worked. And the present saved me where memory could not. Delivery worker from Yui's clipping posted proof of coordinated evictions. Small shop owner showed letters from shell buyers. Rival fund happy to wound Moro confirmed abnormal positions. The founder's platform stayed online long enough for the evidence to replicate beyond control. My memories blurred as the crash plan broke. I lost 3 future companies in one breath, then a district timeline, then a crash date. The old map tore inside my head like wet paper. I nearly collapsed in the stairwell while alarms sounded through the building. Not fire alarms, financial alarms, the invisible alarms rich people hear when control slips. Hirota caught up before I reached the elevator. For the first time, her calm had edges. She said I had no idea what I had destroyed. I told her that was the point. The market opened into chaos the next morning, but not the clean chaos Moro had engineered. Our positions were exposed too early. Their rescue narrative collapsed. Competitors attacked. Regulators announced inquiries. Forums that once mocked me filled with screenshots, arguments, fear, and awe. Calendar Prince had moved again, but this time, no one could tell whether I had predicted the future or shattered it. Yui found me outside our apartment after the worst passed. I was sitting on the steps because I did not trust my legs. She did not hug me. Yui was not that simple. She sat beside me and asked what I had lost. I tried to remember the first company name that had blurred. Nothing came. Another memory followed. Gone. A whole piece of the future had disappeared from me. I told her I lost the easy road. Yui looked at the morning sky and said maybe easy roads were how I got lost the first time. That should have hurt. Instead, it felt like being allowed to breathe. Moro's crash did not happen the way they planned. People still suffered. Markets do not stop bleeding because one person chooses better, but the worst version was broken. The mechanism was exposed. The timeline moved somewhere I had never seen. For the first time since rebirth, the unknown did not feel like failure. It felt like a future that had not been stolen yet. Afterward, everyone explained me wrong. That was almost comforting. The forums called me a whistleblower, a manipulator, a hero, a fraud, a genius, and a curse. Some said Calendar Prince had saved the market from a hidden crash. Others said I had caused the panic and changed sides when I saw a better trade. No one knew the full truth. That was safer. Moro Capital did not disappear. Companies like that do not vanish because one plan breaks. They rebrand pressure, sacrifice divisions, move directors, bury coins in deeper pockets. Hirota vanished from public view for several weeks. And one evening, outside a station, I saw a silver coin balanced on the edge of a vending machine. No note, no threat, just a reminder she was still out there. The difference was that I no longer looked at the coin like an invitation. I looked at it like weather. Dangerous, real, not divine. At home, Ren's mother noticed the changes without understanding them. She saw that Yui and I spoke differently now, not softer, more honestly. Yui still challenged me when my voice became too cold. She still asked who would be hurt by a plan before asking whether it would work. She did not fully trust me. That mattered. Easy forgiveness would have been another kind of fantasy. One evening she placed tea beside my laptop and said I was more useful now that I was less certain. That was probably the kindest insult anyone had ever given me. My original parents remained the wound I could not close. I saw them once from across a shopping street. My mother carried groceries in both hands. My father walked half a step behind her, pretending not to watch whether the bags were too heavy. They looked younger than the parents I remembered, less tired, still carrying worries I had never bothered to understand. They passed within 10 steps of me. No recognition, no pause. Why would there be? To them I was a stranger. I wanted to say sorry. Instead, I adjusted the community fund again that night and made sure their neighborhood would survive the next wave better than it had in my memory. It was not enough, but it was different. My future memories remained damaged. Some patterns stayed sharp, others had holes. Few contradicted each other so badly, I stopped writing them down as facts and started marking them as possibilities. That made me weaker in one way, but I had gained things Haruto never had. People who would question me before I became cruel. Reputation heavy enough to open doors and dangerous enough to make me careful. Method built on verification instead of worship. A reason to protect strangers who would never know my name. The Calendar Prince nickname did not vanish. It changed. Before, it meant Lucky Oracle. Now it meant someone who arrived early enough to matter and unstable enough to fear. I did not love the name anymore. I carried it. That was the new status of my second life. Not victory. Responsibility with a public face. The last message came on a quiet morning. That felt appropriate. The first panel had appeared over beer cans and a ruined life. This one appeared while Yui complained that I was burning toast because I had been reading 3 reports at once. The blue-white light opened near the kitchen window. Not large, not dramatic, clean enough to stop both of us breathing. System message, timeline deviation rate unstable, unregistered returner movement detected. Yui could not read all of it. I could tell from her face that she saw something, but not the same words I did. That was new. The system was leaking or changing. Far away, another person had moved against the timeline. Another regret-filled life. Another buyer. Another experiment. Maybe someone like me. Maybe someone who had accepted Morrow's offer. Maybe someone worse than both of us. For a moment, the old hunger rose again. No first, move first, buy first, win first. Then Yui took the burned toast out of my hand and said my name. Ren. Not Haruto, not Calendar Prince. Ren. The name no longer felt borrowed. I looked at the panel until it faded, and for once, I did not wish it would tell me everything. My first life had ended because I kept waiting for tomorrow to become safe. My second life began because I thought knowing the future would save me. Now the future was damaged, open, and alive. I had money, but money was no longer the point. I had status, but status was no longer the cure. I had memories, but memories were no longer the master. Somewhere beyond my view, the timeline market was moving again. Morrow was still alive in the shadows. Other returners were stepping onto roads I could no longer predict. The world I had saved from one crash had become a battlefield where history itself could be pressured, priced, and stolen. But I was not the man eating noodles in the dark anymore. I was not the boy pretending luck was enough. I had burned the easy map. What remained was harder, a sister who would challenge me. Parents I could only protect from a distance, a public name I had to carry carefully. Future no one fully owned. And this time, when the unknown opened in front of me, I did not close my eyes. I chose to move forward away.